Rise, renew, reconnect. Welcome to From the Ashes, a podcast where bold conversations empower healing and authentic, vibrant living. I'm your host, Valerie Huang Beck, and I'm on a mission to evolve the dialogue that moves humanity harmoniously forward.
And the fire in the darkest night, the phoenix burns. It's ready for flight. Shadows may come, try to tear you apart, but you're the flame.
All right, everyone. Welcome back to From the Ashes. Today, I have with me Telfer McConaghay, formerly known as Veda Dave, and we're going to jump into that in a bit. And I'm really, really happy that you have made it onto this podcast. And I'm going to start by giving the audience context of how I know you and also an acknowledgement for you that I've actually wanted to give for a while. So I discovered Telfer, aka Veda Dave, I want to say 2023. And it was because he was the president of the Colorado Ayurvedic Medical Association. He's the president. He set up this conference on trauma-informed Ayurveda. And when I heard that there was a conference like this, I was like, I have to go. I have nothing to do with Colorado. I'm there. And it turned out to be a really life-changing experience. And in many, many ways, and I can go into that in a little bit. And then 2 years later, you announced the Native Indigenous Medicine and Ayurveda conference. Yet another edgy topic that you don't find at Ayurveda conferences, period, right? It's just Ayurveda to me, the community of Ayurveda, honestly, in the States is very conservative. So, and I had been grappling within myself for years that there were things that I was being taught and that I was learning that weren't in integrity because of the context within which we live in the United States. Both of us are no longer in the United States as of right now, but it informs our experience as holistic practitioners. It informs our experience as people in general because of the turmoil, to be quite honest, of the way that we've had to live. So the fact that you were kind of already a couple steps ahead of me in terms of making this stuff public, I was thrilled. And if you can't see him, he's white American, right?
Well, I'm a white guy.
Yeah.
I'm a Scottish, Irish, white guy, born in North Carolina, raised in Minnesota. I have no business being an Ayurvedic, putting on conferences with Ayurvedic, indigenous Ayurveda, but all the more reason for to be exploring those realms, right?
Exactly. And so the what I really want to acknowledge you on is that you have stuck your neck way out there. And you have felt the blade. I think you have felt the blade. And I seen it. And it wasn't coming from just one direction. You stuck your neck out there for all different directions to come at you. Right? And I respect, first of all, because it's such a difficult position to put yourself in, with not only with who you are, but just how tense people are these days and how sensitive people are these days. So you know what? I'm just laying that out there for you. This is Telfer for you guys. Yeah.
Thank you, Valerie. That means a lot to me. And what to say? As you say, it's been sort of a choiceless choice, if that makes sense. Yes, I realize that I've put myself in situations where, indigenous, Native American communities were concerned. What does Ayurveda have to do with anything? The Indian faction of the Ayurvedic community was concerned, and I kind of can't help myself. It's a little bit just baked into who I am, and all of it is purely an expression of my own curiosity. It's all like, what is the cutting edge of what I wanna play with and experiment in and learn about, and what dots are connecting for me and what makes sense, and is that of interest to anybody else? And it turns out there are people like you who are, with me. They're like, "Yes, thank you. Can we please have this conversation?" And so I just return the gratitude to you for being one with ears to hear, eyes to see, and makes all the difference in the world.
Yeah. And, I think I have questioned my own path so many times as an Ayurvedic practitioner because, like, at the end of the day, I want to be really not only, like, true to myself, but I want to actually respond to what's going on around me, not just have the theory or the dogma that has already led us up to here. Like, we evolve as human beings, and I don't know where to start. I kinda wanna.
Well, let me
Yeah,
respond to that because I'm with you in
yeah,
that. And you know, on the one hand, yes, Ayurveda is a timeless science that has been protected and preserved over millennia, mostly through oral traditions, and comes to us from the Indian subcontinent, which includes the regions that are now Afghanistan and Iran and Tibet, and like that whole region is the birthplace of this form of nature-based medicine. And so we honor that tradition and the land and the people from which it came. Yes, beautiful, of course.
yeah.
And it's 2026 and we're in the United States or Japan or Central America. And one of the things that is so beautiful and empowering and inspiring about Ayurveda for me is that it's written into the classical text. Shashrut himself does this thing where he says, here's an example, like here's a principle and here's one example of this principle in action, and the wise physician will figure it out from there and apply
Mhm.
it appropriately in their circumstances. And so for me, it's this paradoxical thing where my way of honoring the tradition is to do it as I perceive it to be impactful in the circumstances I am,
Yeah.
right? Ayurveda in Colorado in 2026 is appropriately different than Ayurveda in Kerala 10,000 years ago. And so I've gotten myself in trouble with, like, I've got teachers who are mad at me. I've got, revered teachers who I'm not in touch with anymore because I am I allowed to swear?
Oh, please do, yeah.
Okay, all
Go
right.
for it.
Because I have been drawn to these very traditional lineages and these teachers that have the way that it's been passed down, and I take that and I love it, and I'm so grateful and I honor it, and then I go out in the world and, like, fuck it up a little bit.
Yeah.
And because that's, again, that's just, who I am and how I
Yeah.
move.
So, I'll give you a little bit of context about myself, and I've been reflecting on this a lot, is that, as cultivated as I have been because of Ayurveda and yoga, I come from a consciousness of deep rage. And it is having lived a lifetime of seeing injustices and just seeing how humans really fuck it up for themselves. And because we have this tendency to want to impose our own beliefs and views onto others because we see it working for ourselves. But we then automatically assume that everybody has the same context and will benefit from the same things, and I think ultimately, yes, at first it all comes from a really good place, but then it gets really twisted, and that is not exclusive to anything. You see it in politics, you see it in healthcare, you see it in Ayurveda, you see it everywhere, and nothing is so beyond the touch of human beings that it's, you know, un how do I call this? Like, it's not beyond criticism. Yeah,
Yeah.
in
Yeah,
our
it's
approach.
not infallible, and one of the guiding, I almost need to get a tattoo of this, is this phrase, all models are wrong,
Mm.
but some are useful. And so Ayurveda as a model for perceiving reality is wrong. It doesn't encapsulate every single complexity of the, quantum realm, and, there's stuff that is imprecise in there and rooted in the culture from which it came, a and it's a very useful model. And I hear you where what begins, and I recognize this in myself, the first semester that I started studying Ayurveda full time, I was a proselytizer. And, you could have sent me, to, Africa to try to convert people, right?
Yeah.
In our colonial heritage. And and it starts, as you say, so innocently. It's like, "Oh my god, this is really powerful for me. This is really working and changing my life. You should check it out." No, you should really check it out. And it you know, and
Yeah.
and it goes from this very sweet human to human, I feel good, I want you to feel good too, till all of a sudden we've got the Spanish Inquisition and the rest of modern world history.
Indeed. It just everything you're saying hits so much closer to home now
Mhm.
because of where we're at right now, this
Yeah.
week, right? Yeah.
I mean, I will say I grew up in Minneapolis.
Mhm.
The little convenience store outside of which George Floyd was murdered was a couple blocks from my high school. It's like I used to skip out at lunch to go get a snack there. And now, what, 5 years later, Renee Good is murdered less than a mile from that, less than a mile from where my brother and his wife and infant daughter live, and it is terrifying. And it's escalating, and, instead of what a normal government might have done in the past, like, "Okay, we need to have an investigation, we're gonna back off." They're just doubling down and getting more aggressive and just trying to push through that resistance, and in a lot of ways, they're actively stoking the chaos. Because if they create, ICE comes into a relatively safe situation, creates danger, and then they get to say, "Hey, it's dangerous here. We need to send in, military," and so on. And it's a scary moment to be a human on Earth, because it's not like the United States is ground zero in so many ways, and nobody is, there's no place you can go in the world that isn't affected by climate change, imperialism, colonialism. How many bases does the US have? It is, as Lao Tzu said, "May you live in interesting times."
We do live in interesting times. I want to ask you because this could become a whole conversation in itself.
Yeah,
However,
that's a rabbit hole. And I just wanna share, like, you mentioned the rage,
yeah,
and I feel that as well.
yeah.
And it's actually taken a long time and a lot of therapy and a lot of, vision quests and sitting alone with myself to get to the root of this and understand, come to terms with the validity of the rage,
Mhm.
and really, yeah, get into what is this? And it is a lot of, like, humans, we're fucking it up for ourselves. Like, food and medicine grow on trees. We could all be sitting by the river, playing music and dancing if that were the political priority. However, and, I'll point you to, there's a great paper that came out in 2024 where, as a thought experiment, this guy wanted to find out if we wanted to give all 8.5 billion people on the planet a decent standard of living, which included things like, a home, a cell phone, a car, a dishwasher. And I'm not saying that should be the goal,
Right.
but as a thought experiment. And what he found, did all the math, the shipping containers, production capacity all over the world. He found that with 30% of current global production capacity, we could feed, clothe, house, educate every single human on the planet. And that's infuriating.
Yeah.
And so I think there's valid rage to that. And what I've dealt with is twofold. One is, what are helpful expressions of that rage? Just being mad eventually becomes like a self-righteous
Mhm.
sort of like masturbatory practice. It's this like, I'm a good person because I'm furious about this. It's like, yeah, great, but ultimately just that uncontained rage, it just burns more things down. And so, using some nice Ayurvedic principles, what's the healthy expression of those red colored emotions? And it shows up as passion and energy and focus and clarity. And so if we can transmute and, slide ourselves down to that other end of the spectrum, and give that power a proper expression, that is an aspirational direction to go. The other thing that comes to mind is, I should I forget who said this, but there's a beautiful quotation, something like, "I sat with my anger long enough until she told me her name was grief."
Mm.
And that gets me too.
Yeah.
And if I really sit long enough, it makes me weep. And so that rage and that grief are two sides of the same coin for me, where yes, I'm furious that, the US military is the greatest contributor to climate change, and these are all enmeshed issues. And it's just deeply sad that humans are suffering, that the more than human world is in such distress. We're living through a mass extinction event, and it all, and maybe we'll talk about this as we go along. Death and destruction is an appropriate expression of life, right? Like, the forest dies over and over and over again and composts itself, and that's why it lives forever. And so I'm not at all against change and transformation, and on the contrary.
Yeah.
However, it's just so unskillful. You know, that's like, the natural world does it. Like, let's follow her example, as opposed to, trying to impose power over other people and over nature. This dominator culture is exhausting and
Mhm.
deeply sad, and as we said, infuriating.
Mm. Both of us, I have actually made the hopefully permanent move to Japan because I recognized that. Well, I'll tell you my thought process in all of this. I was a freshman in high school on Long Island when the planes hit the Twin Towers.
Mm. Yep.
And I think I was in a very unique situation because like 60% of us in school were like brown, Asian, minority at least. And it our context was so distinct, right? Because there was a wider understanding already that it's not just about the color of your skin or your religion or et cetera. There is something a lot deeper going on involving the powers of that are beyond us. And I held on to that for a while, and then I started seeing more and more of what this world is, like how much of this conflict is people pitting themselves against each other. And how our biases, how our prejudices really fuel this hatred and
Yeah.
this righteousness that causes us to violently engage with each other. And, when I made this recent move and then all these things started happening, um, I and seeing like what happened to Renee, good. Knowing what I know now about Vedic wisdom and, like, just dharma and everything, it's so much more nuanced. What is appropriate action is so much more nuanced. And for me, I left because I see that this country requires more than just rage and protest. There needs to be action. And I think people have the right to defend themselves. I think citizens have the right to defend themselves from a government that's trying to kill them. I just didn't want to be to have to pick up that gun, right? I don't wanna but that doesn't mean that I don't think that people have the right to, but that don't have the right to, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, I just but I don't know, I have so many thoughts on this, and, at the end of the day, in order for something to happen where we can massively all live in more harmony, there needs to be massive action now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And yeah, there's so much there. And I was also a freshman in high school when the towers fell.
Ah,
Uh, I remember it was one of my best buddies' birthdays, 9/11, and so we were out at Buca de Beppo, like, looking around like, "Happy birthday." It was, like, very eerie, very,
mm,
very weird moment. And and I remember even at the time, there was this awareness that, like, if you understood anything about geopolitics, like, literally, if you had ninth graders' understanding of geopolitics, you couldn't be that surprised.
yeah,
And it's not to say that, like, anybody deserved any of it, but the United States as a force in the world had it coming. Eventually, someone was gonna hit back after decades of violent aggression and, setting up bases all over the world. Like, it was bound to happen. And that then was a very controversial stance to have. I remember getting in arguments with fellow high schoolers and high school teachers who basically said, "Well, now we're at war. We're going into Afghanistan. We're going into Iraq. And whatever your beliefs are, you have to support that choice. Because if you don't, then, as W would say, you're either with us or against us." And I
mhm,
reject that
yeah,
binary. And I imagine, that may still be a controversial stance. And then, just to push it one step further, you look at something like October 7th. And of course, we all abhor any sort of horrific violence like that. Like, nobody wants to see anybody suffer. Well, th there are some psychopaths out there. I can't say nobody, but 99% of the population is horrified to see images and to hear those stories. And when you violently repress a whole population for decades, and there are no political solutions, and peaceful protest is met with violence, the human will towards freedom
mhm,
and dignity is irrepressible. And so eventually, if there are no other options, violence becomes the option.
yeah,
And so that, you know, is what's happening in Minneapolis at this point. And eventually, you know, I've thought about this a lot. I'm in Costa Rica, and, my life has just sort of, I just like surfing the wave and washed up on shore here. And I wonder if you have this sense. I have a feeling of survivor's guilt, and it's
uh-huh,
not quite that,
uh-huh,
but there is this sense of, talking to my friends who live in South Minneapolis, who are trying to explain to their young children that all the sirens, all the whistles and honking in the street is probably not a car accident. And and here I am, on a mountaintop overlooking the ocean, and how dare I? And wouldn't it be the righteous thing to go back and get in the mix and be at the protest? But then I come back to who am I, and what is the scope of my influence, the scope of my power, the limitations of my energy, attention, intelligence, and what is my role to play in this grander unfolding of human evolution. And and so that helps me relax a little bit, because if I were there, I would also, like, I don't own a gun. I don't know how to use a gun. I'm a yogi, and I don't think that our ice Asian friends give a shit.
Yeah.
And I don't I
Mhm.
don't think, talking to them about the transition in their identity structure, like, what did it feel like to go from citizen to Gestapo? And how's that impacting you? And what were the changes in your psyche? And, like, did a falcon fly by, or like an American eagle land on your porch and you took that as an omen? Like, those are the conversations I wanna have, and I believe in the world-changing power of those conversations, and there's a right place and a right time, and there needs to be a baseline of safety, and it's, built into a lot of the Vedic prayers. When we start class, we say this prayer that, like, thank you for the wisdom, thank you for the teachings that come down to us, and thank you for the safety that is required for us to sit here and share with one another. Because if there were a saber-toothed tiger in the room, forget about the five values and prana-tejas ojas. Like, we got to run for our lives, or fight for our lives.
Yeah.
And so that, I think, is also part of my uh, dance of anger and grief, while also grappling with my own privilege, where I have the privilege of being inspired by beautiful wisdom, and it's a privilege to be confused about why we can't all just get excited about nature-based principles and what are they, biomimicry in architecture, and why can't everybody get excited about that? Well, because 90% of the world is in survival mode and in fear for their lives. There's a saber-toothed tiger at their door every day in various forms, right? And so that's complex, and I don't have a sentence that's gonna round out that ramble.
Maybe it's because we are both '87 babies and we had to live through this.
86,
'86,
86 for the
okay. Because like, what you just what you just expressed, there's so much of that I also, uh, can empathize with and feel. I was living in New Zealand when Donald Trump got elected in 2016, and I made the choice to come back. I will not make that choice again.
Mm,
And it was kind of out of this, like, final inkling of duty that I felt.
yeah.
And then
Duty to whom? Duty to whom, or to what?
I guess the American people, the thing is, like, I've never been patriotic. I think, and because of 9/11, this, like, feeling that I'm American and that I am bound to this country, uh, from that point onward, just crumbled, and now is non-existent. Uh, and I am 100% like that. I am okay with that, and I have made my peace with that.
It's
Survivors,
really interesting.
yeah.
Sorry, go
Yeah,
on.
so, and, like, survivors, I know how you say it's, like, not quite survivor's guilt, but there is this, like, it's I made the choice to leave. It's a privileged choice, it's a luxurious choice, and yet it is also a choice that, there's sacrifice in this choice as well. But there's a very deep conviction for me that I am going to do what it takes for me to live out and contribute in the way that I am going to be the best positioned to. right? Which means that maybe it's not being on the ground having a gun and going out to protest.
Secure your own oxygen mask.
Yeah. And, like, the fact that we can have this conversation and that I can spread ideas and that I can encourage people to also think beyond their rage, to think beyond survival. Because I think it's I no matter what situation you're in, you actually do have choice. It's just that some choices are riskier than others. And refugees have again and again, and, like, my family comes from China originally, fled China, right, to Taiwan and then eventually to the States. To the States was not fleeing, that was a choice, but, like, it just you know, in over history, people have decided they've had enough and that to move forward and to evolve and to grow and to thrive, they needed another context, and I think that's perfectly valid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, humans as natural born animals on the planet, like, most animals have migration patterns, and that is an appropriate aspect of life on Earth, and the fact that we've demonized migration so thoroughly is, the same way we put up like, there's a whole story about the invention of barbed wire and how the history of the Western United States radically changed after the invention of barbed wire. Because all of a sudden, these open plains would just randomly have a big, long fence around it, and it messed up all the migration patterns. And and so, we have that on a global scale at this point. And and, what you said about patriotism is really, really interesting because I've lived abroad before, and it's been one of the first things that I learned was to differentiate between the United States government and myself, as opposed to saying, "Oh, like, we kidnapped Nicolas Maduro." No, the United States government kidnapped Maduro, and I happen to hold a United States passport. But there's a difference between those 2 entities. I do not include myself in that "we." And but that issue of patriotism, I've thought about this a lot because I do have patriotic bones, and I do and I'm just but trying to figure that out, it's like, okay, I really disagree with basically everything the United States has done in terms of foreign policy for the last 100 years, and our domestic policy is anti-human in so many ways, and like, so what is it? And it comes down to, it starts with the land, like the actual land that is the United States and North America. It There is such profound magic and beauty and depth of connection available there, and so I've spent years of my life wandering mostly the Western United States and been in canyons and on mountaintops and in valleys and in rivers, and I deeply love this land. And that is also a source of sort of anger when I hear people who have, you know, never left their little hometown and they say, "I love this land." It's like, you don't know what you're talking about. I agree with you, but we're talking about different things.
Yeah.
And then the other aspect of it is the humans
Yeah.
and the wide spectrum of humans that I've been able to encounter. And no, again, growing up in Minneapolis, playing on the soccer team at Minneapolis South High School, had a bunch of Somali friends. Some of the coolest, funniest, kindest, talented people I met at that time. And just by the melting pot is a real thing where there are people from all over the world where, again, like, you go to China, there's mostly Chinese people, right? And so it is, and that has its power and beauty as well. But growing up in the United States, like, is growing up a world citizen if you do it right, right? And so I've talked to friends who are, European friends, Central and South American friends, and their comments are that, from their observation, generally speaking, Americans are the most self-centered, like, insular, like, thinking the whole world revolves around them, generally speaking. Excuse me. And the Americans they know who have been able to break out of that are their favorite people.
Mhm.
And so there's something about, like, if we can crack ourselves open, if we have the courage to let go and to break through that little seed, that little shell of, like, America's the greatest country on earth. It's like, have you been to Patagonia? Have you been to Scandinavia? But and but it takes breaking through that shell and being born into a greater reality that then allows you to turn around and be like, "Oh, this place is also amazing. I am proud of the land that gave birth to me." Yeah, so that's my, relationship with patriotism.
Yeah, and I think there is a difference. The thing is, we're taught that, like, our nationality is some kind of, like, God-given thing, but a nation is a completely made-up construct, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
we're all Earthlings.
Yeah, we're all Earthlings. We do happen to have a somewhat of a cohesive culture also, because we do identify as nation, and some of that has been really cool. Um, and then recently, maybe not so cool, you know?
And there's paradox in that
Yeah, yeah,
because, as millennials, I'm sure you also have a whole bunch of friends who have the dream of, like, "Oh, yeah, we're gonna buy a big piece of land, and we're gonna create a village, and I just wanna live in community with
yeah,
my friends," and everybody wants to live in community, and that's usually spoken by people who never have lived in
yeah.
community. Uh, However, there's an intelligence there, excuse me, again, frog in my throat. There's an intelligent longing there, recognizing that there is something about, shared values, a shared North Star. Like, "Hey, I believe in this, you believe in this is the way we wanna live, let's run in that direction together," right? And that's very powerful, that changes the world, that makes human life worth living, and as we said at the beginning, taken to the extreme, it becomes cult, it becomes a repressive government, it becomes prejudice against anyone who doesn't speak that language or share that particular mythological origin story. So, yeah.
Mm, mm. Yeah. I mean, there's just are fighting against ourselves in so many ways, um, like, internally, you know? And, well, let's ask I wanna ask you this because I said I would, and this is a From the Ashes podcast, so the transition from Veda Dave to Telfer.
Uh,
Yeah,
yeah. Where to begin with that? So, since I think it was about 2014 when I bought the domain name vedadave.com. And I had just started my 4-year Ayurvedic doctor program, and I'd been studying Ayurveda, Vedic astrology, yoga really seriously since 2009. Graduated college in '08. The economy wasn't great for anybody in that moment, but I was an English major with a minor in music, and so there were exactly 0 jobs, and so I ended up at an ashram in California,
okay.
and so that's where I dove deep into yoga lifestyle, Vedic astrology, and the first karma yoga role they gave me was in the kitchen. And so I was working in the garden and in the kitchen with an Ayurvedic chef who also happened to have been in Palestine multiple times and was shot in the head with a rubber bullet by the IDF. And so as a 21, 22-year-old man I remember saying to him once about that whole region, well, it's complicated. And he explained how it's actually not that complicated. So anyway, so fast forward, it's 2014, and I realize that my devotion to the Vedic sciences is a beautiful thing, but capitalism doesn't care, and I'm gonna need to make money doing this. If I'm gonna spend 4 years studying this full time, I need to build a brand around it, and I need to figure out how I'm gonna offer that to the world. And so, my first name is David. Lots of people know me as Dave, and I started with Ayurveda Dave, and then all of a sudden it was just so obvious. Veda Dave, it's cute, it's catchy, it's the same 4 letters rearranged. You know, and that served me well for a decade or more, and it was really, uh, yeah, beginning of 2025. 2025 shook the snow globe of my life. Raise your hand if you're with me in that. And so Telfer, my name is David Telfer McConaghay. Telfer is my middle name. It comes from my mother's side of the family. It's my Scottish family name. Both my grandparents, born in Scotland, immigrated to Canada, and there have always been pockets of people in my life who knew me as Telfer or Telf, and I don't know how that happened, but they're just these little crews of humans who know me as Telfer, and I always loved that, but for some reason, I never felt like I had permission to actually claim it and introduce myself as Telfer and ask people to call me Telfer because everybody knows me as Dave or David. And which one do you prefer? I don't care. And so as over the last 2 years, I set down Veda Dave. It was early 2014, 2020, early 2024 when I was struggling and Veda Dave wasn't having the reach that I wanted it to and wasn't paying the bills. And so I went and got a job as a mover, like, picking up heavy boxes and setting them down somewhere else and just let Veda Dave go dormant for a minute to reassess and reevaluate. And that led me to being the event director for a guy named Dr. Zach Bush for almost 2 years. And that was educational, evolutionary, expansive, empowering in so many ways. And it was nice to just like let Veda Dave sit on the shelf. And so then come 2025, my 80-year-old uncle, who's the only other man I know who is known as Telfer, says he wants to go to Burning Man. And he doesn't walk so well. He's a little wobbly, but he wants to go to Burning Man. And so there we are. And this experience with Zach, he'd been encouraging me to prepare to relaunch my own offerings, basically saying, hey, like, this is great and you're going to outgrow this role really quickly, and you need to it's like very humbling to have someone with a global voice like Zach say, hey, like, you need to go do your own thing because it's important and you've got things to say and you don't want to play second fiddle to me. It's like, okay, are you sure? I kind of like just having a job. So with that encouragement, that planted the seeds of like, okay, I'll relaunch Veda Dave, but that just wasn't right. I could just feel that Veda Dave identity had reached some sort of expiration date. And so here we are at Burning Man, me and my 80-year-old uncle, and I sit him down and I tell him a little bit of the story, and request his blessing to start introducing myself as Telfer and to announce myself to the world in a professional way as Telfer and to become known, become visible as Telfer. And he was thrilled. He loved it. So got the blessing from my elder. And the next step that I took as I was careful to bring with me all of the remaining Veda Dave business cards that I had.
Mm,
And so on the final morning, I went over to the temple and sat right in the center, and I had a little personal ceremony where I offered Veda Dave up to the funereal pyre that is the temple at the burn. And so that was a powerful moment of transition, of a handing of the baton, both, like, generationally within my family, but also within my own life, and letting an identity that I'd been with for 12 years, that had served me well, that was such a beautiful being, and to let it burn and to let it be composted and to surrender it and to release that energy so that it can be recycled throughout the universe, and maybe some of it comes back to me, but who knows, and to let Telfer be born as it wants to move through me. And it's been so fun because, of course, I looked up the etymology of the name Telfer, and it goes back to it's very much Scottish, but as the word has French origins. Taillefer means to cut iron.
mhm,
Literally just means to cut iron, and but in Scottish tradition, it was a nickname for a fierce warrior, iron piercer, one who pierces the iron of their adversaries, or whatever. And I don't have anything that grandiose about it. Like, my ancestors were metal workers. Like, they literally were the blacksmith. And I like to dream that maybe they were alchemists playing with metal as well, but that's my own fantasy. And then I went on Urban Dictionary just out of curiosity, the modern day Oracle of Delphi, which is Google, and went on Urban Dictionary, and Urban Dictionary says that Telfer means one who destroys without malice.
mm,
And that's it.
yeah.
That when I read that, m my whole life just kinda clicked, whereas it's like dominoes falling, click, 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 all into place. It's like, "Oh, that's what I've been doing." And and made so much sense, and
Yeah.
the past doesn't change, but the story you have about the past changes your relationship to it, changes how you feel about it, and that changes that is how we change the past. And so it allowed this complete reframe of who I am and what I'm doing. And I look at, okay, what am I doing with Ayurveda? What am I doing with Vedic astrology? I'm destroying without malice. Hey, let's look at the identity structures, the daily habits, the ways of knowing, the ways of making meaning in your life. Let's look at the ways that those are maybe no longer serving you, or those identities that have expired, those ways of being that are no longer accurate or up to date. And let's just let them go. I'm not mad at them. I'm not mad at Veda Dave for having existed. I have no malice whatsoever towards
Yeah.
Veda Dave, and I burnt him in a temple. You know?
Yeah.
And so this is part of the work that I'm more consciously aware of doing these days, which is to help myself and help others identify what is that core identity? What is that authentic self at the center of your being? And only when we know that can we identify an effective delivery system. And
Mhm.
and so this was also one of my teachers in the Animas Valley Institute tradition of nature-based psychotherapy. He was talking to a whole group, but he sort of turned and looked at me as he said it. He said, "Some of us confuse a delivery system for an authentic identity." And so I had literally named
Mm.
myself Ayurveda Dave. And so what's the difference between Ayurveda, the delivery system for my gifts, and my identity? And so there was no distinction. And so when I didn't have a full clinic of Ayurveda clients, my identity crumbled. And I didn't know who I was, and I didn't have any self-worth, and everything went to shit because my identity and what I was doing to deliver the gifts were entangled. Whereas if I pull back and tune into that more like vertical plane, okay, who
Mhm.
am I? What helps me stand upright in the world? What's the axis around which I'm spinning? Well, now I know myself as Telfer, the one who destroys without malice. And that just, sends roots deep into the earth, sends my crown chakra exploding into space. Yes, that. And and then once I'm established in that, then there are 10,008 different delivery systems, right? I'm doing it right now. It can look like an astrology. It can look like a conversation in the line of the grocery store. It can, it looks like me on the dance floor. Like whatever I'm doing can be a delivery system for Telfer.
Yeah.
But what I do, how I share the gifts that are innate to Telfer kinda doesn't matter. And if I figure out a way that those gifts also help me pay my rent, awesome. But but the liberating part of that is that, you know, Telfer could choose garbage collector as a delivery system, and we can find the mythopoetic significance of that, and even choosing to become a mover.
Yeah.
Isn't that interesting? Isn't that an interesting choice of all the sort of mundane manual labor jobs I could have gotten to pay the bills in this interim period? I specifically chose a job where I was meeting people in their moment of transition, literally one of the most vulnerable moments of someone's life, where they are releasing an identity as the one who lives at this address and stepping across a threshold, literally walking out that door, stepping across that threshold for the last time, and then walking across the next threshold, and like they would follow the moving truck. We would literally cross the threshold from one house to the other together, and full spectrum, right? Sometimes we would go to one apartment, then the next, then to the house because it's a couple moving in together. Hooray! Sometimes we would go to one house and then an apartment because it's a couple getting divorced. Hooray!
Uh-huh.
Congratulations and condolences. So again, like, and so this is what I'm obviously super excited about and passionate about, and comes from this deep well of enthusiasm and sense of like soul level offering of who I am in the world, is identifying these moments of transition, and and I think it was Donald Rumsfeld or maybe Henry Kissinger who said, "Never waste a crisis," right? And of course, there's some malevolent geopolitical quality to that. But in your personal life, yeah, never waste a crisis. Oh, your relationship just ended? Awesome.
Yeah.
What a profound opportunity like the floor just fell out from underneath you of all the reference points that you know to be yourself, your home, your job, your relationship, whatever it may be. Awesome. Now you're closer to bedrock. And let's not waste that opportunity when everything is changing anyway. Let's change it in the direction of authenticity, of soul level self-understanding, and find that vertical axis around which the rest of your life can now orbit, as opposed to panicking and invading Venezuela,
Mm.
metaphorically speaking.
That was perfect. Thank you. What I really
Yeah,
hear.
long story long,
Well, what I'm hearing from that really is this, like, grounding into a way of being that permeates and then is consistent throughout no matter what moment you are in, no matter what role you're stepping into, you are still with your core is Telfer, and that allows you to really be in your dharma no matter what you're doing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
this is something I actually was talking about earlier today with other people and actually navigating my own life too recently, right?
Yeah. Yeah, you
Uh,
just made a big transition.
I did. I was the one who was moving. And yeah, I crossed over to the other side and I actually, very intentionally recently took on a job at a cafe here in Japan.
Yep.
Not because and it's probably one of the lowest paying jobs I can get. I could teach English and I can be doing much better or, I'll do other stuff too, but this was a very deliberate choice.
Mm.
And it was a deliberate choice. And you and I both have been in Kate Stillman's world. So we know fractals and identity evolution patterns. So I'm going to add a little bit of jargon here just so we can have this conversation.
Hey.
Kate, there is a part of me that has always been very good at throwing myself into an unknown fire and navigating and like really gaining strength from it. And so I decided this time, instead of doing what I'm comfortable with, I am going to put myself into the position of the most beginner I could possibly be. I can read a little Japanese, I can speak a little bit, but that doesn't mean that I have full grasp of anything that's going on. I don't know the script. I don't know how to politely bow and the p- the honorific terms I need to say to customers. And yet I am deciding to do this because this is part of my next evolution. And it is to be integrated so that I can be with anybody, really. Like, they don't have to speak the same language. They don't have to, and I can be the one to come in and really open people up, right?
Mm.
Provide the context for others to open up because I am opening up. Yeah, and there's a beauty and there's something so settling, right? It's the swastika piece of Ayurveda. To be settled in the self is true health, right? There's something so settling in knowing that you are good and in any situation.
Yeah. Basic okayness
Basic
is
okayness.
the most aspirational state I know of. And that wow, thank you for sharing that because, at the beginning, you talked about me sticking my neck out, like, I see you doing the same thing, and what a radical choice, and I hear that on some level, it maybe was in the category of choiceless choice, where there was a call to adventure, and, what else were you gonna do? To refuse the call multiplies your suffering, and the call is just gonna keep getting stronger, and so, okay, you're compelled to make a big change, but then within that, there's a spectrum of intensity that you can choose, and I really hear this longing, like, to crack yourself open and make yourself available, to make yourself vulnerable. It's a really interesting form of a vision fast, right? Where it's the same energetic signature as one, why does one go out into the vast wilderness alone with nothing but water for 4 or 7 days and just sit there? It's to make ourselves available. It's to strip away as much pretense, as many of the protector parts, as many of the old stories that are, clouding or distorting the information that comes into our field and distorting our interpretations of the external world, our interpretations of who we are. And you're doing the same thing by throwing yourself into this situation where you are supremely vulnerable. You can't read the menu that you're giving to the people that you're supposed to serve. You're supposed to be the expert on the menu, and just making yourself as available as possible for the most interesting conversation you could possibly be having with the world. And that that takes a bunch of courage, doesn't it?
Yeah, courage. I've I've been reading Brene Brown's book on and she talks a lot about this, like, true vulnerability takes courage.
Yeah,
You can't have one without the other,
yeah.
right?
A friend of mine once coined the phrase vulnerageous,
Mhm.
vulnerable, courageous, and it also then has the energy of outrageous. And it's just absurd. Like, to be that vulnerable takes so much courage. And yeah, I love Brene Brown's work. Been what is that book called? Something about I've been learning from her about leadership,
Yeah,
because part of my edge zone, my evolutionary molting that's happening right now is going from serving other people's inspiring projects to allowing or inviting other people to serve my inspiring project. So for the first time, I've always been a solo entrepreneur. And I've in the meantime committed myself, thrown my whole life into someone else's inspiring project. And eventually there are power struggles and it's not my project, and that becomes a problem. And so, okay, grappling with the fact that it needs to be my project, and then I hired a bookkeeper. I hired a fractional chief marketing officer to help me, filling in what are the things that are in my genius zone and what are the things that are not.
yeah,
And to value my own work enough to trust that it's worthy of other people's time and energy, and it's worthy of my own investment, right? You gotta pay people if you want them
yeah,
to help, and it's worth that.
yeah,
Um, yeah. Mm.
yeah, yeah,
So, okay, we were talking about you, and then I
yeah.
habitually made it about me. So, okay, so you're working in a cafe, and I wonder if you have a moment that sticks out to you. And what I'm curious about is, like, I would love to know, like, what has been the moment of the greatest, like, emotional intensity in that job so far? And that could be full spectrum, joy, discomfort, but, I'm kinda curious about, like, to simplify the question, what's the most uncomfortable you've felt in that work so far?
Well, it hasn't been very long. Honestly, I had my orientation yesterday, right?
Oh, okay.
But the thing is, I the last time I worked in Japan, it was 13 years ago, and I was an English teacher.
Yeah.
Everything was done for me. Like, my supervisor, if she needed to be there to translate, she was there, you know? I had people in my corner. This is completely different, and it's interesting because Japan has evolved, and they are no longer so xenophobic. Like, and they're no longer so you would be surprised, right? Sometimes, like, if you were me 13 years ago, you would be surprised at some of the things that I heard. Like, there was one time I went to this dance studio to take a dance class, and the front desk lady was like, "You're American, but you're not blonde." Like, weird things like that where it's, like, very simple. Yeah, just misunderstandings of what foreigner is. This time around, like, there are so many foreigners around, plus there's a there has been a shift in, I think, the consciousness because nobody's treating me like as if I come from a different country. And there's good things about that, and there's also terrifying things about that because as soon as I walk into the room, I am one of them, and I need to be able to do what they do, which includes reading the contracts and saying the phrases and all of that, which I really don't. If I'm gonna be honest, like, I think I have a grasp about 50% of that right now. So, like, one of my things I'm gonna be doing this weekend for sure is studying a lot. And so I am just gonna continue to just throw myself into this unknown. There is still also an aspect, the way that Japanese work culture is, that there is just a lot of that. You get thrown into the fire and you have to figure things out. You are gonna be asked to do things that you didn't sign up to do, and that's part of the experience.
Mm,
So,
mm.
I'm ready. I'm ready, and I'm ready to fail, and I'm ready to look dumb. I'm ready to not know, to be accidentally rude, And I'm just a lot more forgiving to myself than I was 13 years ago. That's for sure. I've learned a lot. And I've learned a lot about self-forgiveness. I've learned a lot about, like, you can't be everything to everyone. So, going in, I am just a lot stronger. And that gives me, like, a lot of strength. Yeah, and hope.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Strong enough to fuck it up.
yeah, yeah,
And, like, strong enough to be ripped to shreds in so many ways, right? Strong enough to suck at it for a little bit. And and, there will be moments, I'm sure, of what we call an authentic failure, right? Where you studied, you did everything, you put yourself in this situation to, have a great encounter, and it just goes sideways. And it's the way of the world of soul just sort of poking at you like, are you sure? Are you sure you're strong enough to be totally dismantled and rebuilt in this way? And that's it's I've been so grateful for this reframe because it is a total reframe of what might commonly be interpreted as failure and an indication that you need to do something different as if there's something wrong. It's actually a milestone along the path towards in the direction that you're being called.
yeah,
And and so, yeah, I'm really curious to hear how this journey unfolds for you. And again, it makes me think of so there's a book called Iron John, which is by Robert Bly, and it's one of the foundational texts of the modern men's work movement. And it's, you know, one I've read it 6 times and at various stages in my life, and it is different every time because 'cause I'm different. And there's a and it's all about men's development, but it's pretty universal human development, and where there's a phase that's called ashes work.
mhm,
And it's when this boy with golden hair who has all these gifts and magic to share with the world has to go and work in the kitchen, which in the castle is, like, underground, and he's basically just shoveling coal, feeding the fire, clearing out the ashes, feeding the fire, clearing out the ashes, it gets all sooty, and it's ashes work.
mhm.
And that's what I consider there's in multiple phases, we all go through this cycle over and over again just when we think we've reached the pinnacle, we're back at the beginning. But an example of that in my life is working as a mover, where it's like, "Oh, I'm Veda Dave. I, give astrology readings and give people life-changing advice and tell them who they are." Bullshit, man. Go work as a mover and, just pick up heavy things and set them down somewhere else. And then it's so funny, as happens in the story, he's doing this ashes work and, like, a piece of his golden hair slips out and the king's daughter notices it, and that sets off a whole other series of events. And so as I was moving and, like, you know, talking to the people and having them sign the contracts and pay the bill or whatever, my golden hair would slip out, and all of a sudden we'd be in a counseling conversation, and I'd be
Yeah,
my therapist hat would
yeah.
be on, and they'd look at me like, "Wait, who are you exactly?" I'm like, "Ah, don't worry about it, thank you, see you later." Uh, and so yeah, I see you stepping into some ashes work, and I'm excited for you in that because your golden hair is gonna slip out from under your bonnet, and something else is gonna happen. And because you know, with all respect to everyone in the service industry is the most some of my favorite people, some of the best humans I know have spent a lifetime in the service industry. Nothing against that whatsoever. And Valerie, I just get the sense that your dharma and your destiny does not end with being a server in a little cafe. Just a
No.
guess, it's just a feeling I have.
Thank you, yes, and, the thing is, like, this is all visioning. This is all part of the vision, and it all will come together. I'm gonna wrap this interview up because it's been an
Yeah.
awesome conversation, but there's
Well,
one.
we've talked about
Yeah.
everything. We there's nothing else to talk about. We definitely are done here.
But I do wanna ask one question to you because you talk and you touch upon destroying without malice.
Mm,
And one of the things that I actually was talking about with clients today, actually in Kate's world today, is this, like, needing to let go, to surrender, to drop that which is holding us back, those old identities, those old ways of being, right? That
mhm,
that once served us so well, and yet they're no longer have a place. So there's this theme of death and burning.
mm.
And I know this is gonna be a big question, but what do you see as needing to be burnt at the stake now for humanity to move forward?
Hmm. There are 1,008 answers to that, and the first thought, best thought is actually what what needs to die is the demonization of death.
Mm,
So much of Western culture is, worship of youth and and to the point where, Trump is just a 12-year-old who's now 80, right? Psycho-emotionally, he's a little boy, and when he's painting everything gold and having wrestling matches in the rose garden, all the other 12-year-olds who have grown old are like, "Sick. That's cool." And so there's this epidemic of worshiping the adolescent, and and it is and again, adolescence is a beautiful phase, such a powerful evolutionary moment in life, and it is so many of us get stuck there
mhm,
because that is when biology stops and culture and self-cultivation come in, right? Like, biologically, a human baby is born, and as long as it's got, like, enough food, sort of like, biology, it'll grow and get stronger and go through the phases, and then it goes through puberty, and once it goes through puberty, it's ready to reproduce, right? And that's sort of like the biological process, and the psycho-emotional, the psycho-spiritual evolution keeps up until then, but after puberty, it's up to the culture, it's up to the elders, it's up to the individual themselves to continue evolving into an authentic adult and eventually an elder. And so you look at all the Hollywood movies, all the rom-coms where, the one that is the guy that the woman should go for is actually, like, the adolescent one who's super playful and funny and silly as opposed to, like, you know, the guy she's currently engaged to who's just sitting quietly having an adult conversation with his dad or something, and how terrible is that? And so, yeah, that's maybe a stupid example, but it's also real. It's also deeply encoded into culture that, uh, being 16, I wanna be forever 21 or whatever, and so that needs to burn, and I wanna see a culture that goes back to reverence of elders. We put our you know I feel old, turning 40 this year. I don't even know, any celebrity I name is gonna age myself. But anyway, there's a bunch of young, hot people out in the world that get put on billboards and everything, and meanwhile, our elders are, sort of warehoused in nursing homes. And I would like to see that reversed because some of the coolest people I know are old
Mhm.
and don't talk that much.
Yeah.
But what they do say, I wanna write down or, like, have carved into my bones. And so, again, long story long, that's that's one answer to a really good question.
Yeah. And we're gonna sit with that one for a while because that can be widely applied.
Yeah,
And yeah, thank you
yeah,
for that
yeah.
wisdom.
Well, and just to finish the thought as I'm thinking about one step further, I believe that the United States is going through an adolescent period as a country.
That's what I was gonna say.
And we're a little bit stuck, our mom who has provided us everything, mom being the land, right? This generative, abundant land that let us the Midwest is the breadbasket of the world, all this amazing, and we're rebelling against mom. Fuck you, mom, and doing a bunch of stupid shit. And I see that as what's happening on the planet in a larger way, where we're in this transition, and I think this idea comes from Charles Eisenstein, but I've adopted it as my own. We as a species are moving from Mother Earth to Lover Earth. And in between, we're in this adolescent phase where, a child goes to its mother and asks for milk or attention or whatever it needs without regard for the mother's capacity to offer anything. Mom, you're tired, you're stressed, you're malnourished, you're, freaking out about a thousand things, but your child needs you and does not care or notice that you don't have it right now. And so that's been humanity's relationship with Mother Earth for millennia. And again, food grows on trees, medicine grows on trees, everything you need is just here. And so hunt, gather, whatever, you're good. And we're currently in this adolescent phase where we're rebelling. We're cutting her down. We're burning her. Again, it's a big fuck you, mom. I'm stealing $20 out of your wallet, right? Except it's all the oil out of the ground. And that is, mostly talking about like male development here. That's like, boys who like a girl are mean to her, right? And so then the transition, the mature expression of that is lover earth. And that the difference between mother and lover, all you Freudians out there, is that the lover is a horizontal relationship. There's give and take, there's
Mhm.
mutual nourishment, there's mutual consideration, and it's a partnership, it's teamwork. And so that is the sort of macro scale aspiration that I hold for humanity, is that we can, you know, survive the various ongoing drunk driving accidents of our teenage years as a species and get to a point where we're able to maintain a healthy, loving relationship with the more than human world.
Beautifully said. All right. Well, thank you,
Uh,
Telfer, for this awesome conversation. For daring to go to the places that not many dare to go. And I look forward. I really want to see what happens, you know? And how we
may
continue
you live in
to
interesting times.
yeah.
It's not boring. You wouldn't wanna get bored.
No. Well, we're not bored. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Valerie. This has been a joy, and it's nice to, yeah, have a conversation where anything is possible. There's a practice we maybe did some experimental threshold crossings this evening. Just like, what if we say this? What does it feel like to say that publicly? So we shall see. But yeah, it's wonderful to be here with you. Thanks for being a comrade and ally in this journey. Happy to share planet Earth with you these days.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thanks for tuning in to From the Ashes. If this episode sparked something in you, remember, your evolution matters, and we're rooting for you every step of the way. For coaching, community, and free resources to help you rise into your full potential, visit thevibrantvisionary.com and download the Vibrant Visionary Blueprint, your free guide to reclaim your energy, clarity, and creative fire. If you love this episode, please share it with a friend or tag me, Valerie, on Instagram at vibrantvisionary.val. I'd love to hear what resonated for you. Until next time, keep rising.